All right, so what we're going to do is talk a little bit about keyframing motion within those layers. So if we go down to the text layer, where it says motion design right here, the red layer, the other thing that's cool about After Effects too is that with each layer you can color code it. So if you didn't want this to be red, you could just click here and change it, to whatever color you wanted, maybe yellow. That would be better. Here we go. And that kind of helps things keep organized. Anyway, next to the little color palette, there's a little arrow. If you click on that, it'll expand the layer. And right where it says transform, if we open that up, we have a few different things that are listed. We have the anchor point, position, scale, rotation, and opacity. For the first thing I want to do is just keyframe the position. So I'm going to click on position, and then I'm going to click on the selection tool over here, and I'm going to take this guy and I'm going to drag it to the bottom of the screen, right about here. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is just align my cursor up right here that indicates the time right at the end of my moving video animation. Okay. So this is the blue one is where the text is moving and then it stops at that panel. So I'm going to keyframe right here. Now in order to keyframe, this is kind of similar to using auto keyframes in Cinema 4D. Notice next to the word position, looks like a little stopwatch. Okay, this is good. This is how you add a keyframe. So if you click on this, it's the same as if we were to click an auto keyframe in Cinema 4D. In this case, it's going to automatically place a keyframe in the position that you have highlighted in the timeline. So I clicked on the little icon there. Notice how it gets highlighted and it has a little clock around it. A little number hand there, and also in the timeline it drops a little yellow diamond. Okay, that indicates a keyframe. So now if we were to move ahead in the timeline, so I'm just going to move to 5 seconds. I'm going to move to 8 seconds, and now if I move this, just like in Cinema 4D, anything that you do to the change in the position, it will drop keyframe for you automatically. Okay. And so we can preview that now. Starts out at the bottom, and it slowly rises up to the top based on those keyframes. Okay? And just like in Cinema 4D, if you don't like the movement, you can click on that individual keyframe and you can move it around. Okay? So if you didn't like the speed of it, if you wanted to come up a little faster, you can move the keyframe a bit, and then it will recalculate and make that position. Also, when you're on a keyframe, let's just stop. When you're on an individual keyframe, like right here, you could take and move, if you wanted this to move over to the middle a little bit more like that, it will automatically change it for you. Okay. Now, it's not the thing about keyframes in After Effects is you don't want to click this on and off. Okay. So now that we have our keyframes, if we click this off, the keyframes are gone. So in order for them to be active, that little keyframe button has to be on, okay? And you see they disappeared altogether. So we'll get them back just by undoing our motions there. Okay, so now we have that motion moving from the bottom to the top. The other thing is that I don't really want this to be in view the whole time, so I'm going to fade this in fade the opacity in, okay? So if we go back to my original one here, you notice that it sort of fades from nothing to a very opaque view. And we can do that with keyframes as well. So if we go to opacity, we can do the same exact thing. If I go back to this original keyframe at just about 5, and if I click a keyframe here for opacity, I can also change this. Notice when you scroll over the percentage right here, you get the little hand and the arrows on either side. If you just click and hold that down and move it down, like to the left, you can get that to go down to 0. You could also just type in 0, but it's a nice effect to use. So I'm just going to keep at the first keyframe. I want this to be totally transparent, so you don't see it at all. And then I'm going to move ahead to let's say this keyframe, and I'm going to make this 100%. There we go. So now if we preview this, you can see it starts out transparent, moves up, and slowly becomes more opaque as it goes throughout. So you can do multiple different keyframes. You can rotate the text. You can change the position. You can change the scale. Any of those things you can do just by adding in those basic keyframes. Okay. So it's a great way. I mean, this is a really versatile tool that we can start to use to give some of these different effects to. All right. Now, the other thing that I wanted to do here was to give it a little bit of a drop shadow. So that's one thing that I have in this video is the text has a little bit of a drop shadow, which I think looks pretty nice. So in order to do that, we just click on our layer again. We can go up to effect. If you click next to the character, if you click on effects, you can search. So I'm just going to search for drop shadow. Here we go, drop shadow right here. And if you double click this, it will apply it to your scene. Okay. Now when you do that, it's going to apply it directly to the layer that you're working on. So in this case, it's applying it to the text. And let's just move forward to the end so we can see the full view there. And now we can change things. So for example, we can change the opacity, we can change the direction. I'm going to make the direction coming from below. The distance, you know, make that a little bit less, like that. Change the color. So let's say, I don't know, make it like a dark green shadow instead. Okay. So all of those things can be manipulated up in the palette, the project palette. If you need to go back to the project, you can just click on that effect there. Okay. So now if we preview this out, we can see that it's moving upward in space. It's changing its position. It's getting more opaque, and it has a drop shadow applied to it as well. Okay. So those are some basic effects that we can do to create some of these subtle animations. So now that I have my footage how I want it with the text moving exactly what I want, I'm gonna play around with some different effects and adjustments. And to do this, what you can do is you can create an adjustment layer. So if you go to Layer, New, and go to Adjustment Layer, essentially what this is going to do is kind of create, copy and paste everything that you've done so far into a new layer, and you can do effects and adjustments to that layer without actually interrupting what you already have underneath. So if you do a bunch of effects to it and you don't like it, you can just simply delete it and get rid of it. Okay. For example, now on this effects layer, if I go to effect and I don't know, let's see, color correction, for example, if I just go to black and white. Okay, so this is going to automatically change my composition to black and white. And so now if I play this through, you can see that my composition is now in black and white. But if I don't like this, I can just turn it off with the little eye tool here and see what it looks like in color. Okay, you can also control the opacity of that layer. So if I wanted it to be, you know, just slightly black and white, I could just reduce this down a little bit. Let's say like 80%, and now you can see that it's a little bit of that green is coming through, but it's not, you know, totally black and white. So you can play with different elements in that sort of way. And there's lots of effects to play with. So what I encourage you to do is bring in an adjustment layer. Once you've done a few things with text and you know, time and things like that, just go up to effects, and a lot of these are really similar to Photoshop. You know, if you just go to, you know, generate light, beams, waveform, you know, any of these sort of things are really interesting. Distort, you can bend, ripple, all kinds of stuff you can do here, blur and sharpen. So there's lots of things you can do. Just play around with the different effects and see what they do. It's a good way just to kind of learn what these different effects do. And just remember that with anything that you have, you can always keyframe the opacity, you can keyframe the position and scale, any of those things you can keyframe with those individual layers. So for today, I'd say go through, play around a little bit, generate some layers, use an adjustment layer to play around with some of the effects, and then I'll come around and answer any questions that you may have.